What's good with y'all? Let y'all stroll on through real quick. What up with y'all? What's good with y'all, fam? Shout out from Florida. That's what's up. Shout out to all my people in Florida. If y'all hear my kids throughout this live, I mean, they mama out of town. And, yeah, they just loud. So, if y'all hear my babies, excuse me. Hey, Preston, I don't know if you're, Jackie, I miss you. Man, somebody say y'all miss us on social. I've been on social media. I've just been talking about, justice for black people, but I've been on social media. Canada, what's up? So, yeah, man, I guess I'll start with talking about, what I want to talk about. So before I even get into, talking about some of the things that I put on Twitter yesterday, close the door, Eden, don't come back in. Before I even get into talking about, some things that I put on Twitter yesterday, I talked about on Twitter, systemic racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I talked about abortion in the black community. A lot of my tweets, I think alarmed a lot of people who have been informed about the black community, I think via Fox News and CNN. So I think that anytime you hear so much rhetoric about a particular community from people who don't actually come from the community, when you actually hear a different angle, a different perspective from somebody who actually came from the black community, I can see how it can sound like excuses, because it's in a different way than you've always kind of heard it. You've always kind of heard the manifestations of what happens in the black community, and never really the root issues in the black community. So because of that, I wanted to just do a live to inform people. Somebody's laughing that I said Fox News and CNN. I don't really know why that's funny, but anyways, yeah. So so basically, to before I even express my heart and explain in deeper detail, what I meant, I want to just say that everybody's not going to like what I have to say. There's going to be people who listen to this and still, in some way, shape, or form, have their own views, and I'm not going to change your mind. I also want to say that my IG lives and my posts are not merely to cater to white people. This post is for everybody, right? I had a lot of my white brothers and sisters say, thank you for trying to teach us XYZ. And then I've also had some, my black brothers and sisters come out and say, it's not your job to try to teach them everything. As a Christian, but that's also as a black man who's an apologist, right? A lot of the times when I'm informing other people groups, other, races like the white community about the black community, especially in the Christian community, I do so in a lot of ways for the black community. I think I said this on the last IG Live, because there's such a great exodus. I don't think we realize how many, black people have walked away from the faith, not just because of situations like George Floyd and, Mike Brown, but because of situations like on Twitter, being heartbroken at the fact that there are so many white people who have something to say about a community that they know nothing about, that they think that they're informed about because they watch the news, and so our perspectives and our realities are so different. Growing up in the black community, especially the urban black community, a community that I came from. So I want to just inform people about systemic racism, about the Black Lives, what I think how we should treat the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm not saying, I'm always right. But as a Christian, I want to speak to you as a Christian who's a black man who grew up in an urban community, a community that, that is a lot of times looked at very poor, in a bad way because of the high abortion rate and the black on black crime and all of these things. But I also want to talk from a very objective truth, because as a Christian, I think that we should live by objectivity and not just our emotions, our mere emotions, right? So I'll just start with the Black Lives Matter movement. Yesterday, I put on Twitter that we as Christians, we are not borrowing the Black Lives Matter slogan from the Black Lives Matter movement. That the Black Lives Matter movement has in every way borrowed a Christian worldview. That Black Lives Matter and standing up for people who are marginalized and oppressed in this country is a biblical worldview. That is not a worldview that the world created, right? And so my heart by saying that is that I think that as Christians, a lot of times we try to divorce so many great things that our organization has done because they're not holistically Christian. And I think the problem with that is that when we do that, we are so inconsistent in so many areas in our life. So inconsistent. Not only that, the news always informs you on what is on what they don't want you to be a part of, on what is evil, right? So many people have said the Black Lives Matter movement has killed people. Name one person that the Black Lives Matter movement has killed. It is no different than in the 1960s and 70s that they said that the Black Panther Party was the single greatest threat to America. Yeah, right. Nobody in their right mind thought that the Black Panther movement was going to take down the greatest government in the history of the world. But the news and the media preaches this rhetoric to instill fear in things that are not true. Now, hear me when I say this. Am I defending everything that the Black Lives Matter movement stands for? No. Am I an official Black Lives Matter movement member? No. Are they holistically Christian when you look on their website? Of course not. Should we live by every single creed and rule that they have? Of course not. But the matter of the fact that what I'm trying to explain is that the Black Lives Matter movement essentially is saying that there is a people group that is oppressed, that is not treated fairly in this country. And if Christians can't get behind them with nothing else, it should be that. Because that's what the Christian call is for, right? So it's just like, so if you don't want to support the Black Lives Matter movement because they're not holistically Christian, you should stop supporting a lot of these cancer organizations who try to fight for breast cancer. Some of the founders of these are atheists. Right? We don't try to research things that we're passionate about. But and also one thing that I also want to say is I think when you put anything up that the Black Lives Matters movement say or do, a lot of times my white brothers and sisters don't realize that when you say, I don't want to support the Black Lives Matter movement because they're not Christian, you have to understand that is a part of your white privilege. You have the privilege to hear a statement and it not resonate with how you've been treated your whole life, but you have the privilege to assess whether it's Christian or not. There's no emotion emotion attached to the saying Black Lives Matter. You have the privilege to assess let me research and see if they're Christian. I know they're saying Black Lives Matter, and I know the Bible says it as well. And I know the Bible says that we should fight for the people who cannot fight for themselves. But let me see if their rules and their laws and their biblical principles line up with mine before I get behind it. That is white privilege. Sorry to tell you, that is white privilege. We as black people, as a black man who is a Christian, it is very easy for me to divorce all the things that I don't agree with the Black Lives Matter movement says and does, and agree with what they are saying that is good, because I immediately identify with the slogan Black Lives Matter. Why? Because I was treated like crap most of my life. You are in a form of privilege. The fact that you even can assess the movement in that way, and try to divorce the whole movement or whatever, because they don't agree with your views. Somebody just said, what is white privilege? I'm glad you asked. And also I want to say, after I get done talking, I'm going to open it up for questions for a couple of minutes for people who might be confused. What is white privilege? White privilege is having the luxury to not think about your race, right? It's to have the luxury to wake up and say, man, I'm white in America. You know what I'm saying? And that's the reason why a lot of times you see my white brothers and sisters, and I'm not trying to come down on all white people, because there's so many great white Christian voices out there that I respect and that has helped black people fight for justice and equality. I don't think that black people, honestly, some black people might disagree with this, but the truth is that black people will not even be in the position that they're in a country that never gave them anything if white brothers and sisters throughout history did not fight alongside of us. I truly believe that. So this is not an indictment on all white people, but this is a challenge for the white people who to realize that your white privilege causes you not to think about you being a white person every single day. Your white privilege causes you to hear a statement like Black Lives Matter and to see a movement like Black Lives Matter, and then for you to assess every single thing in the movement and not get behind the slogan. I think it'd be completely different if a movement came out and said, women lives matter. And I think that I think a lot of white women in the faith, I think they'd be way more willing to get behind a organization that's not holistically Christian if they're fighting for the rights of women. We do it all the time. But now with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think some people find it so hard to get behind a movement because they say F the police every now and then, and they do things that are not Christian. They're not claiming to be Christian. But in this way, as far as standing up for black lives, they are more Christian than a lot of people who say that they are Christian. In that way, I'm not saying that they are Christians. I don't really know who started the Black Lives Matter movement. But what I am saying, I personally feel like we can get behind them in that truth. Am I saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is of God? Am I saying that we should link arms with them in every single thing? No. But I also think that saying that the Black Lives Matter movement is not Christian is a cop-out for a lot of people. I think that even if the Black Lives Matter movement was holistically Christian, I think that a lot of people will still have a problem with it. That's just my thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that. Yesterday on Twitter, I talked about systemic racism. And the reason why is because when I started to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of people started to bring up the fact that they support. There's so many abortions in the black community. That's what causes a lot of the hardship and the poverty and whatever. And I think one of the things that frustrates me when I hear people talk about abortion in the black community, and how there is such a high abortion rate in the black community, is that they never talk about the root of a lot of and the systemic racism, which is, I think, a lot of the root of a lot of scenes that you see in the black community, like black on black crime and systemic racism. So I began to do a flurry of tweets, And all of my DMs and all of my comments, there are people saying, no, you're wrong. This is an excuse, yada, yada, yada. And it is not an excuse. It is not an excuse. Now, what I'm about to tell you guys, some people might disagree with it. Some people might agree with it. But I'm finna just let y'all on some game, right? I'm from one of the worst neighborhoods in Chicago, right? If you ever have opportunity, if you don't know about the Roseland area in Chicago, it's called the Wild Hundreds. Google it, right? My grandparents on both sides were from this neighborhood on the same street, right? Right now, it's one of the most violent neighborhoods in America. And I want to talk about the Black community and how so greatly my white brothers and sisters, and not just my white brothers and sisters, people who don't come from the Black community are so misinformed about systemic racism and what it does to a community. Now, before we even get to present day, we have to talk about history. And our history in this country starts in 1619 with slavery. Now, some people may say, oh, you guys are always talking about slavery. Why are we talking about slavery? The reason why we talk about slavery is because you cannot talk about the present if you are not informed about the future. We do it all the time in scripture. When we do it when we read a text, we do it to get context when we read one of Paul's letters, and we have to do it when we talk about Black people in the history of this country. Bringing up slavery is not a cop-out. Bringing up slavery is context, right? This is where the Black body started in this country. As some of you may know, we were slaves. We were brought over here and like not voluntarily. We were kidnapped, essentially, brought to a land, right? And we were treated like crap for like 400 years, over 400 years, right? We were slaves on plantations. And so what did that do? The black person for 400 years did not have the opportunity to accumulate wealth, to build a true family structure. We were stripped from our homes. We were stripped from our families. The Black man was humiliated. He was belittled. He wasn't taught how to even be a man in the history of this country. His origin in this country, he wasn't even taught how to be a man, right? You know what I'm saying? So by the grace of God, a lot of us converted to Christianity or were already Christians because, people don't want to tell you that, African nations were some of the first Christian nations, like Ethiopia, but I digress, right? But we was brought to a land that we were never meant to succeed in, right? So we don't have to dwell on slavery. We already know the story of slavery. So for years and years we were slaves, right? Fast forward into the Emancipation Proclamation when slavery was abolished, right? After slavery, what happened to Black people? Black people were hunted and lynched by the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists for years and years and years and years, right? So think about that. That is the origin of the Black family and the Black community in the history of this country. That is our origin, right? We work past a lot of it, right? We're free. And we're so-called free in a country where we can't vote, we can't use the bathroom, we can't eat in restaurants as white people, but we're free, right? We're still killed, we're still hunted. The Black man is still painted as one of the most dangerous people in this country, and we were killed more than anybody in this country. How ironic, right? But you go all the way up to 1921. You have something called Black Wall Street. Now, people talk about the Black community and how the Black community, they're not really doing anything for themselves. And you see a famous clip with Martin Luther King and this white guys interviewing him saying, Black people need to pull themselves up from their own bootstrap and all of this. But just think about this. In the 1920s, something in Tulsa, Oklahoma was formed called the Black Wall Street, because Black people, right, after slavery was not given loans, right, was not given homes, was not given property, right. They had to stick in their own communities, right, because the nation was still highly segregated. They created one of the most well-sustained neighborhoods in the history of this country, which is Black Wall Street. Right? They accumulated so much wealth in their own neighborhoods because they built stores, they built communities, and they bought within the black community. I think when I researched it one day, I think the black dollar rotated like 30 times or something like that in Black Wall Street before it left and went to another community. Now, the black dollar rotates 6 hours in the black community before it leaves and goes to another community. Why is that? Is it because black people just happened to stray away from what they were doing in Black Wall Street? No, that was not the case. What happened was the Black Wall Street, the community that would allow black people to finally start to accumulate wealth throughout generations was destroyed by air and by land. They were killed, their businesses were burned, and they were, it was essentially destroyed, right? So it baffles me that when I see people on Twitter and Instagram saying the black people are destroying their own community. No, the black people are destroying stores in their community, but they are not black. A lot of these stores are not black owned, and the reason why is because what happened was when black neighborhoods that was predominantly black owned was progressing and growing in the history of this country, white people who were in power got afraid. Let's just be real. This is not some subjective truth. This is objective truth. They saw that we were building wealth for ourselves, and they wanted us to continue to depend on them. If you think I'm lying, all you have to think about is that this was 1921. I digress. I'm not lying. This is the truth, right? So throughout history, right? Every time the black dollar started to accumulate, they knew that was power. So they literally, all you have to do is just Google Black Wall Street. Google the massacre of Black Wall Street. The one time in which black people started to, we had to accumulate wealth in our own communities because we couldn't do it nowhere else. We were destroyed. So what do you have? What do you have after that? You have generations of people who after, not just in Oklahoma, but this happened all over the country, right? Black businesses destroyed. So now you have the black man and the black woman who cannot get loans. It is statistically proven that in the 1920s, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, black middle class people could not get loans to buy homes before a white lower class family could. We didn't get loans to start businesses, so it was almost impossible for black people to accumulate wealth themselves. And then when we tried to do it in our own communities, they was destroyed. This is not something that I can make up. Google the massacre, if you don't believe me, on Black Wall Street, and you will see. So now you have what? I'm going to get to abortion and all of this and systemic racism today, but let's talk about the past. Like I said, the past informs our future. Let's talk about it, right? So now you have generations of people who cannot accumulate wealth. Remember, white people have been accumulating wealth since the 1600s. Wealth that they started on the backs of slaves that did 400 years of free slavery. Right? Y'all been accumulating wealth and having wealth in your families for generations and generations and generations, right? When we started, it was burned down. So now you have in the 1930s, in the 1940s, in the 1950s, black people trying to accumulate wealth for themselves. They can't get loans to buy homes. They can't get accepted into the best colleges or whatever because those were segregated. So the two ways in which you have to gain wealth was to buy a home and to go to college. Black people can do. So then eventually what was implemented was welfare, which I'm not ashamed to admit. It was many years me and my family, we was on welfare. I grew up in a single parent home, a mother who was a nurse off and on. And then when she became a nurse, we got off welfare and we started doing a little good for ourselves, whatever, you know what I mean? But we got welfare. What did welfare do to the black community? Welfare said that I will give you government assistance after I didn't let y'all have loans, after I didn't let y'all accumulate wealth in your own communities. I'll give you government assistance if the black man is not there. The black man is in the home. You cannot have this government assistance. What does that do? That further takes the black man out of the home, just like it did in slavery. So now the family structure in America in the black community is disjointed, right? Because not only can the black man get loans to buy a home for his family, to go to the best colleges or whatever, he now cannot even be in the home to receive government assistance when the government didn't assist him to really start businesses like his white counterparts. Now, am I making an excuse for so many black people who, like my grandfather, who worked at Ford Motor Company after he got out the war and worked for pennies and pennies and pennies? No, because there are many black people who in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s worked. But I am saying that is not the reality for the large majority of black people who can accumulate wealth like their white brothers, like our white brothers and sisters, right? So you have that, right? So you basically breed, like America has breed poverty in the black community. It is not something that the black community has created on its own. This is something America created, steeped in systemic racism. So for those who think that black people themselves has created some type of poverty for themselves, it's probably your own racist and biasness and your own you being misinformed about the black community. But you cannot tell me that if you have years and years and years of oppression to a people who are kidnapped, that it's not going to create some type of psychological and mental and just physical, holistically effects in the black community, right? Especially when we did things like Black Wall Street to try to accumulate wealth for ourselves and it was destroyed, right? So then you fast forward, right, to the so-called, in the 80s, the war on drugs. Right, and this is leading to abortion and black on black crime and all of this stuff like that. You have neighborhoods of people who are poverty stricken because of the injustice that they have accumulated throughout years. Right, poverty. I got a little secret for y'all. Poverty is always going to create drug dealers. That's not just in black communities. That's in all communities. When people cannot so-called obtain the American dream like other people in this country can, in the way that some other people can, they're going to sell drugs, right? My uncles wasn't the typical drug dealer that CNN. They was growing up. They was regular men who just sold drugs so they can feed their family, bruh. Like, and they was still poor. Right? So you have the war on drugs. So now for people who talk about, gangs in the black community, black on black crime, drugs in the black community, and who are not informed, take it from a person who grew up in an urban community, who did drugs and sold drugs. This is not some subjective truth. This is me coming from a Christian who is black that grew up in an urban community. Let me tell you about the war on drugs, right? In the 1980s, you have this so-called war on drugs, but it really wasn't a war on drugs. It was a war on black people. This is not some conspiracy theories. This is true, right? Let me tell you something about cocaine, right? Cocaine comes from this thing called the cocoa leaf, the cocoa plant, right? Cocoa plant, you find it in Colombia and places like this that grows from a plant. It's very expensive. The cocaine business is $1 trillion business. $1 trillion business, right? Cocaine was brought to America on planes and on boats. Things that poor black people in the hood did not own, right? So there's a term in the hood that we have for drugs, and it's called being stepped on. Let me inform you what that means, right? A drug being stepped on means when a drug is taken out of its natural state, which is its most potent state, and passed down from city to city to city and is stretched out and things are added to it to make it last so more people can gain wealth off this particular drug, right? So when cocaine, so for example, when cocaine was brought from Colombia and all of this and brought to Miami and then transferred to Indiana, Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, and many cities around the country, by the time it got to black communities, it was stepped on 100 trillion times. I'm exaggerating, but it was stepped on a lot, right? So because poor people wanted to feed their families who couldn't accumulate wealth, the black community created something called crack. This is the epidemic that happened in the 80s. Crack cocaine hit the black community like wildfire. Let me tell you about crack that I sold before I met Jesus, right? Crack cocaine is a weaker version. Crack cocaine is a weaker version of cocaine, the powder substance of cocaine. It is a weaker version, right? When we get cocaine, we add baking soda to it. We boil it in hot water. And the reason why it's called crack because of the crackling sound that it makes when it hardens. We break it up in pieces. I'm not telling you how to sell and do crack. So please, nobody do this. It's a sin. God will judge you for this if you do it. I'm just letting you know the process in which crack is made in the hood. Basically, what I'm trying to say, it is not more potent than cocaine. Cocaine was not a black drug. Cocaine was actually having people overdose way more than crack. In the black community, there were crackheads in my community all the time, and they lived to be 60 and 70 years old. Why? Because it was not as strong as cocaine. In the black community, you could find a drug dealer that would fix your roof, fix your alternator and your stove in two hours for $50 to support his habit. Hello. In the white communities, which white people was snorting cocaine in Hollywood and white communities by the dozens and by the thousands, it was way more potent. But why was the war on drugs an indictment on the black community and not an indictment on the whole world? The reason why is because the war on drugs policed people who sold crack way more harshly than people who did cocaine. If you don't believe me, this is the reason why Whitney Houston got offended in her famous interview when she said, when the interviewer asked her, do you smoke crack? And Whitney Houston, crack? I made too much money to smoke some cheap like crack. Right? Growing up, when my friends started to sell crack, we started to get 3 years per crack rock for a drug that was not as potent as cocaine. When we didn't even bring them over to America, we didn't even bring this drug over to America. This is a poor man. This is a poor man's cocaine. My friend Didi, who sold crack to feed his family, to feed his poor siblings. When his mom was on welfare and his dad was murdered, got 3 years per crack rock. Right? 3 years per crack rock. when people in white communities was doing a way more potent drug and they wasn't getting half of the time. That is what you call systemic racism. What does this do in the black community? This puts the black man who has been marginalized, who has been oppressed, who has not been able to accumulate wealth for his family, I'm not saying, so some people might hear this and say, you're making an excuse for people who sell crack. That is not true. I am not making an excuse for people who sell crack. When me and my brother stuff and my brother used to influence me to do stuff, I used to always say, Mama, my brother Brandon influenced me to do it. And the thing that my mama used to always say, I know he influenced you to do it. I'm gonna get on him, but right now I'm talking to you. So for those who might say that, I want you to know that I preach, and this is not to big me up, but I evangelized in the hoods in Chicago for years. I have not just been a poet, speaker, apologist, traveling the world. I went back to my community and I gave the gospel, and I told drug dealers on an everyday basis that God is going to judge you for you selling crack and selling drugs to the people in your community. I told people many days, drug dealers, gang members, many days, that you are storing up wrath from a righteous and a holy and a jealous God. But Right now, I am not talking to those people on in my old neighborhood and in black communities. I'm talking to you. So just like my mama used to say, Preston, I'm a deal, and I have dealt with your brother Brandon. But right now, I'm talking to you. So don't try to. I don't want people to try to switch the focus on the racism that you have in your heart towards the black community, but you never address the root of the root that caused a lot of these manifestations in the black community. If you hate these things, you should be consistent in hating the things that cause them as well. That's all I'm saying. So all I'm trying to say is that's what the war on drugs did. It took the black man out of his home. It put him in a system. It further didn't give him opportunities to get jobs once he got out because he was in the system, and it created a generations of people going in and out of prison. Not only that, Bill Clinton would later apologize for it, but you have this stop and frisk law in the black community that says that we have the right as police officers to stop black men without a cause. I can stop and search them without a cause. Not only that, there are so many people. I know 5 people, and I don't know it just because rumors in my neighborhood. I know 5 people that had drugs planted on them who wasn't even drug dealers. I know somebody who had drugs planted on them, and they still in jail to this day. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about systemic racism, you have to think about the generations of what has caused black people to live in the conditions that they live, especially in urban and hoods across America. So now to get to my tweets from last night about abortion, right? You have these mothers who these young girls who abort their babies at a very high rate, in the black community, and people think that systemic racism doesn't have. After all I just told y'all, people really think systemic racism don't have nothing to do with the high abortion rate in the black community. Riddle me how. Like you really think you really think young black girls are killing their babies because they just hate babies more than white people or Asian people? Do you really think that? If you think that, it's probably that's not truth. That is not objective truth. That is your own racism and bias. For you to think that black people are just inherently evil in that particular way. It's not true. It's just not true. You know what I'm saying? It's just not true. Now, am I defending people who get aborted, who abort their babies? No. Am I for racism? No. Am I for abortion? That's what I mean to say. No. I hate abortion. The reason why is because I love people. I love children, right? I love image bearers. I think that abortion is sin. But at the same time, as a black man who grew up in an urban community, I know what caused a lot of black women and a lot of black girls to get abortion is the conditions that they live in. And in these conditions, they did not create for themselves, and the black community did not create it for themselves. Not only that, ironically, there happens to be a Planned Parenthood and abortion clinic everywhere in the black community. Black people didn't build those. We ain't build no abortion clinics. You know what I'm saying? So we have to see it as systemic racism. So some people might say, I know so many black women who got abortions, and it wasn't because of systemic racism. That's because systemic racism is a system and not a particular person that we can point out. It's hard to identify systemic racism as systemic racism, right? I'll give you an example. Yesterday after my tweets, there were almost all white people who had a problem with it. Ironically, white people who didn't grow up in the hood, who haven't experienced systemic racism firsthand. So of course it sounds crazy to you because you just haven't experienced it. But I got a DM from a black woman from Compton, California, who said, Preston, I disagree with you. She said, I'm 40 something years old now, about to be 50. And she said when I was 17, she said I'm 30 something years old, about to be 40 or something like that. And she said when I was 15, I got pregnant and I aborted my baby, and it wasn't because of systemic racism. I said, okay, I'm not saying that everybody that, aborted their baby is due to systemic racism. I said the large majority. But I said, can I ask you a series of questions? Right? She said, sure. I said, did you have both parents in the home? She said, no, I didn't. I was raised by my mother. I said, what was your father? And she said, oh, he was in jail for selling drugs or whatever. And she said, I don't know if that's what you're referring to with systemic racism, but that's probably the only thing that my family experienced with systemic racism. And I said, so do you honestly think that if your father was in a home, not only would you not get an abortion, do you think that it's possible that you probably wouldn't even get pregnant at 15 if you had male guidance and love and leadership in your home? She said, that's a possibility. I said, ma'am, I think that you might be a product of systemic racism and you don't even know it. Like you don't even realize that you're a product of systemic racism. You know what I'm saying? I was like, your father, who you said by your own admission was a good man, he just made some bad decisions, sold drugs in a time where he wasn't allowed to vote. Earliest as that. And then when he was allowed to vote, by that time he wasn't allowed to accumulate wealth in his community. He probably had to do some dead end job to get a college. He probably couldn't get a college education. A lot of black people can get a college education back then. So not making an excuse for him, because I think that God will judge every drug dealer according to their own sin. But that does not mean that we should not address the root of these manifestations. It is not saying that drug dealers will get a pass from God. I tell drug dealers all the time, you will not. Right. Watching porn is a decision that somebody makes with their own heart because of their own sin. But that does not mean that the porn industry does not have an agenda to make people watch more porn. That does not mean that the porn industry does not have an agenda to advertise porn to our teenagers, right? And so that does not mean that even though we should talk to our kids individually about how God would judge them for watching porn, that doesn't mean we shouldn't go to war on these industries who try to secretly promote porn to our children. And in the same way, right, I'm not making an excuse for drug dealers, and I'm not making an excuse for people who abort their babies. But what I am saying is that if you are a white person who have such a great problem with the abortions, and every time you talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, and every time people talk about systematic racism, this lady on Twitter just like 30 minutes ago says systematic racism does not cause black people to live in the conditions that they live in. She said fatherless homes cause them to live in the condition that they live in, as if fatherless homes was not due to systematic racism. You have to understand that you guys are talking about the manifestations and not the root. And the reason why you don't know the root is because you are misinformed by the black community, and that's probably because you don't talk to people from the black community. So I want people to just do something that will make you be way more informed, and that is humble yourself and to know that Fox News cannot and will not truthfully let you know the truth about the systemic racism issues that happen in our community. You have to talk to people like me who gonna keep it a buck with you, who gonna keep it 100 with you, who not going to sugarcoat it with you. And I'm not going to make excuses for my black brothers and sisters who out there committing these sins right now. But like my mama said to me for years, right now I'm talking to y'all. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. That's all I want to say. I in a nutshell, like I can say way more. I can talk about this stuff for years and years and years. But I want people to be more informed, right? Believe it or not, I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about speaking up about the injustice for the community, but I don't want anybody to think that my allegiance is not to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't want people to think that I hate white people, because I don't. My heart is to see true racial reconciliation. It's the truth. That's what my heart is. I want to see white brothers and white sisters truly loving one another as Christ has called us to. But we cannot do that. And the reason why I did this IG Live, we cannot do that if you have a heart posture that thinks you are so informed about the black community when you only see the manifestations and not the root causes of these things. Black people are not going to listen to you when you talk about the abortions in our community, when you don't know about the systemic racism, a lot of the systemic racism that cause these manifestations. There's always going to be a disconnect, right? It is a reason why I have deep relationships with white people who have committed their lives to living in black neighborhoods in Chicago. It is a reason why these people views are way different than white people who don't live in black neighborhoods. Talk to Mike Avick, who lives on the west side of Chicago, who I led a church location with, who lives in one of the worst neighborhoods, and tell him systemic racism does not play a part in a lot of the violence, black on black violence and abortion that happen in this community. No, does he believe this because he's brainwashed by the black people he live with? No, he believes this because he lives it and sees it every single day. Talk to my old pastor, Brian Dodd, who grew up on the west side of Chicago for the last 13 years, who grew up in one of the worst neighborhoods in the west side of Chicago in 13 years, for the last 13 years. Tell him that systemic racism doesn't play a part in black on black crime, young girls in the black community, having abortions at a very high rate. Tell that white man. He's not brainwashed. He's just more informed because he's not allowing Fox News to inform him. He's not allowing CNN to inform him, and he's not allowing biased, racist white people to inform him about the black community. He has lived it. Google Brian Dodd. Text Brian Dodd. DM Brian Dodd, my old pastor who discipled me for 13 years in Chicago. Not 13 years, I'm sorry, 8 years in Chicago. Google him. You know what I'm saying? Look him up on Twitter, Instagram. I think his Instagram hashtag is Vision Nehemiah. Talk to white people who actually live in black neighborhoods. And I think that you'll be way more informed. So, yeah. With that being said, I'm done. I know I said a lot, but yeah, I hope this was informative. I guess I can open it up to a couple of questions, and then I'll be out of here. Let's see. Somebody said, how do I promote change? I think you promote change by challenging people in the black community, not by challenging people who don't live in the black community to fight for systemic racism. What I'm saying that abortion is wrong. The high murder rate in black communities are wrong, but we will see these numbers lowered if we attack systemic racism, which caused poverty in urban in a lot of black communities around the country. So fight for not just don't just complain about the black community. Fight for the injustice that the black community has faced for years. Also, call out your racist white friends who speak on a lot of these manifestations and not the root issues. Call them out. Challenge them. Ask them, when the last time you talked to a black person from the urban community? Like myself. Like when? Like challenge them. And I think that our bias has to change person by person in order for it to change. How do you say to those Christians who say Black Lives Matter movement is a terrorist organization? The Ku Klux Klan is a terrorist organization. That's a terrorist organization. I just had to have a conversation with one of my Cuban American friends because his family member said on live, so-called preaching the gospel, that the Black Lives Matter movement has killed more people than the Ku Klux Klan. Where? How? Right? It's not a terrorist movement. Now, do they do things that are not godly in some ways that as a Christian that I cannot stand with? Of course not. I would never stand with anybody that claims to be with the Black Lives Matter movement who says F the police. I believe I believe that's antichrist. I don't believe that's godly. I don't believe in abortion. I don't believe in all of these things. But essentially what they're fighting for is equality for black people. That is not a terrorist organization. That is something that that people has painted in the minds of just fear that doesn't exist. Let me show you a book from my bookshelf right quick. Let me show y'all the book. Put y'all on some game right quick. Chicago history. This book right here. This book right here is called The Assassination of Fred Hampton, right? This dude was killed, right, in Chicago in the 1960s, I believe, right, by the hands of the cops. The Black Panther movement was painted, like I said, I think it was J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black that the Black Panther Party was the biggest threat to the history. Is the biggest threat is the biggest threat to America in the history of this country, or something like that. As if these a couple of thousand of black men was going to take down the United States government. So he said that they were the biggest threat, right? And because of that, this man right here, read this book. It's a great book, right? He not only in the 1960s, this man in the Black Panther Party, he did great work to bring black, Native Americans, and whites low-key together, right? My mama had told me stories for years about how the Black Panther Party started the free lunch program in the black community because our government would give black communities free lunch, and they protected the community against police brutality, and they stood outside and made sure black kids didn't get kidnapped and stuff like that. And were they Christian? No. Am I saying that they were all of them were belonged to Jesus? No. But what I am saying is that America did a really good job of painting this party to be a threat to not an organization that has murdered black people for years and years and years, but the Black Panther Party, you can't even tell me 10 people that the Black Panther Party killed. If somebody can Google to me that who the Black Panther Party killed, 10 people, I'll give them $100. But because they painted fear in the hearts of Americans that said the Black Panther Party was a threat to America, they was able to go in this man's house and shoot him dead in his bed like 50-something times. There, you can Google pictures of him laying in his hallway trying to get away from bullets, laying in his boxers. You know what I'm saying? Like, they murdered him. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that's the same thing with the Black Lives Matter movement. Believe it or not, you guys, please don't think that I'm some kind of conspiracy theorist, because I'm not. I'm a person who lives by objective truth. If I don't feel like the truth is objective, it's not going to come out of my mouth, right? White people do not want to lose power. They don't. I'm not talking about all white people, because there are beautiful white people on this live right now who follow me that belong to Jesus, who are not racist. And I love you. I truly love you. I'm not just saying it for cap. Like, I love y'all. But white people in positions of power do not want to lose power. And anytime a black organization rises up and does anything for themselves, they will paint that organization to look like terrorists, to instill fear in the hearts of Americans. But if you cannot point to me people that the Black Lives Matter have killed. If you can't Google, if you can't point to a body that they have slumped over, like I can point to you a whole bunch of bodies that the police has killed unlawfully in our neighborhoods all the time. You cannot call them a terrorist group. You can say that they're not Christian, but terrorist. No. Go to the museum in the South that has thousands and thousands and thousands of memorials of people, black people who were hung by the Ku Klux Klan after slavery to this day. You can't even count them. That's a terrorist group, and they're still here. They right now chilling in the backwoods of Alabama, still here. That's a terrorist group. Thousands of people that they killed. So no, the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't agree with everything they say. I don't agree with everything that they do. The terrorist group, they was not a terrorist group. The Black Panther Party was not a terrorist group. Yeah. Try something else. It's not gonna fly with me. It's not true. Let me see. If y'all ask questions, y'all gotta ask a couple more questions. Cause yeah. Somebody said the Black Lives Matter wanted to dismantle the family structure, and they left a link. Yeah. What you're talking about is Black Lives Matter movement is a non-Christian organization. They're not going to have Christian values like Christians are. So are they intentionally trying to destroy the family structure? No. But it's some of their laws and policies. Are they supporting some of the, yeah, because they're not Christian. Nobody claiming that the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't really know if they're Christian or they claim to be Christian. But they haven't came out and said, yo, we preach Christ. But to say that the Black Lives Matter movement has not destroyed the family structure more than the United States government. Talk about the United States government. Talk about the history of slavery. Talk about the Jim Crow South. That has destroyed the family structure in the black community. Not the Black Lives Matter movement that started in 2016. 15, one of those. Like, come on. Like this, yeah. Too soon. Y'all ain't ask the questions. Y'all just So somebody just asked about Candace Owens. Let me address Candace Owens, and I think this is the last thing that I'll say. I don't want to tear the sister down. So before I tell you about my thoughts on Candace Owens, let me just say I think Candace Owens is an intelligent young lady. She's brilliant. I think that she's very, very smart, very wise. In a lot of ways, not in all ways. But I don't mean this to be disrespectful. I don't mean this to be rude. I don't mean this to degrade her as an image bearer. But Candace Owens is a puppet. And I don't want to just call people names without giving context. This is what I mean by puppet. Candace Owens is the perfect the perfect example of how a black person is used that know stats but don't truly know black people, right? So a lot of times when and this is the reason, this is the beef that a lot of black people have with Donald Trump, because people could say, oh, Donald Trump has done so much, he done more for the black community, and they provide us numbers, these so-called objective or subjective numbers that he has helped the black community, while at the same time letting him say anything about the black community. Let it, you know what I'm saying? And that's because he doesn't know, and I personally don't think that he cares about black people, right? But so many people look at numbers, and these politicians, they would, which is very easy for politicians to manipulate numbers and do what they do a little bit for black people. And say, this is why Donald Trump can say, yeah, your schools are trash, your neighborhoods are trash. what do you have to lose? Like, and to talk to black people like that, and nobody think that it's problematic because they provide numbers, and but he doesn't know or is intimate or truly care about black people. So you can so-called provide certain numbers and say Donald Trump did this, but if he talks to us and treats us like we're not made in the Imago Dei, that's problematic, right? So I think Candace Owens, what she does is she brings these numbers out and she brings out these stats, and white people say, well, this is a black person who's bringing out stats and yada yada yada. But when you talk to her, you can tell that black people who grew up in black neighborhoods, you can tell that she is disconnected from the black experience. Your numbers are always going to be subjective if you are disconnected with the people that you're putting numbers about. Like, so because of that, that's why she's not a prevalent voice in the black community. That's the reason why more white people follow her than the black community. You know what I'm saying? Also, too, I want to just say this. A lot of her numbers are manipulating. They're not true, right? So before I even get to the numbers, let me give you an example of why Candace Owens is a person who sometimes knows numbers but don't know people. Today, I saw in an article, and I saw on CNN News, that she said the fact that George Floyd is a martyr is sickening, as if he was a perfect man. What black person in America that says something like that about a person who had someone knee on their neck for 8.5 minutes and was murdered on national TV? You are disconnected from the black experience when you as a black woman can say something like that. One. Two, right? Her numbers are manipulating. When George Floyd died, the first day, people were outraged. She posted numbers about the black community and about how white people are killed by the police at a higher rate, which is so not true, right? This is the reason why these numbers are. Let me tell you why these numbers are manipulating. White people are always going to die at a higher number than black people. And the reason why is because white people make up 72% of America's population. Anytime you talk about statistics, you have to talk about population to get the right ratio. She does not do that. What she posted was more white people was killed by the police. Of course, more white people died of cancer this year. More white people have, I think I saw an article that said more white people have diabetes than black people. But why is diabetes so prevalent in the black community? Because considering the fact that white people make up 72% of the population and black people make up 13% of America's population, the amount of people who have diabetes in the black community is alarming. And the same way with police brutality. If white people make up 72% of America's population and black people only make up 13% of America's population, and I think the stat said something around, I think 53% of white people get killed by the police, which is like, I forgot the number, and it said like 32% of black people get killed by the police. The fact that we make up 13% of the population, the fact that it is 30-something% is alarming. That is the equivalent of white people getting killed by the police at like 90-something%. Not only that, not only did her numbers match up, but they and not accurate, but they was manipulating in this way. When you post a stat about how many white people have been killed by the police, it does not show you the amount of white people who got killed by the police who was actually trying to kill the police. It doesn't show you that stat. Black people are not complaining about people who get killed by the police. Black people are complaining about people who get killed by the police who get shot 13 times running from the police in the back. Black people are complaining about black people getting killed by the police who's getting choked out for selling loose cigarettes. Black people are complaining about the police when a 13-year-old boy has a colorful gun at a park and the cop runs up and doesn't even wait 7 seconds to shoot him dead. Black people are complaining about the police when a police officer puts his knee in the neck of a black man for 8 minutes while people are screaming he cannot breathe and he does not care. That's what we're complaining about. There are many black people who died in the history of this country who didn't want to go to jail and had shootouts. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who died by the hands of the police that were unarmed, who was not a threat to the police. So in that way, those numbers are also manipulating. Do not listen to Candace Owens. Though she's intelligent, though she's well-spoken, she is disconnected from the black community, and she is a puppet. She is a puppet for people who do not want to preach the truth about systemic racism, who do not want to preach the truth about the America's history, and who do not want to fight for marginalized black people. Period. So that's my thoughts on Candace Owens. I'm done though. I'm hungry. I want to eat. I hope this blessed somebody. Like I said, I'm not here to convince y'all. Pray about what I said. If you don't, it's not up to me to change your heart. Only God changes the heart. I'm just a messenger. While people are listening, as a teacher, I'm taking this opportunity to teach. Because you know what? After this coronavirus here, I have a feeling that a lot of people ain't gonna be listening no more. When we start, going to weddings and going to social gatherings and stuff like that. But while I have y'all here, I felt like I take this opportunity to tell y'all about the black community. So Fox News won't keep half informing y'all about the community that I came from and that I love. Peace up, Chi-Town Sideways. Love y'all. Serve Jesus. Love Jesus. And love your neighbor. Well, peace.